Recorded.
So from now on, this class is going to be recorded, and then at the end of it, for any other questions or anything, if there's anything personal that you want to talk about at the end, I'll unrecord it. So my name is Mari De Monte, and I am going to talk a little bit about the business aspect of cutting men's hair and men's grooming, and the little things that you can do to kind of elevate what you can control behind the chair. I know a lot of other educators, really great people, have been up on here talking about like fade techniques and design and shear work. And I kind of, while all that stuff is really important, I think there's a lot of conversation about raising prices and what you can control to kind of forward your finances in what we do. It doesn't really get touched on that much. So that being said, I'm going to do a bit of like a presentation, so it's more of like a note-taking class than really me working on a mannequin. I'm going to touch some stuff on mannequin work and styling work at the very end, but for the most part, we're just going to kind of talk about the things that have helped me kind of grow my business and also my price range. Okay, so I'm going to start the presentation here, and you're going to have to like, I'm 35 years old and I don't know how to use a computer, so please be patient with me. All right, let's see. All right. Okay. So we're going to talk about marginal gains.
I'm on that meeting thing right now. I'm doing that meeting thing right now.
All right, so how to elevate the experience of the chair to benefit your income.
You can unmute your line by pressing star.
Actually, I'm a big runner, so this term came from my running coach, Knox. This is what a lot of high-end athletes use as a term to basically elevate their craft and their athletics little by little. When you're like the best of the best, how can you keep getting better? Because perfection isn't really a thing that's plausible. You can always kind of do little things to kind of benefit your outtake in the long run, right? So, but real quick, so my name is Mari, based in New York. I've been trained in the luxury aspect of men's grooming, and I have a pretty high-end clientele here in Manhattan. I've been doing hair since I was 18. I'm 35. And the reason that I kind of wanted to talk specifically about finances is because usually a lot of times when I do a lot of these presentations and seminars, we, in the barber scene specifically, a lot of that conversation is like, well, how do I raise prices and how do I elevate my craft and how can I, I'm worried of losing clientele if I raise my price and all that stuff. So and the reason I kind of find this a really interesting thing to talk about is because I've charge about $175 a haircut, and I only do men's hair. And when a lot of people hear that, it kind of creates a bit of sometimes some people get mad, and then other times people just want to know how I've gotten to this point. So I kind of wanted to break it down and help you guys figure out kind of behind my line of thought when I was progressively raising my prices over the past 16 years, right? So a lot of my work can be found on Runway and Ford Modeling Agency, and I've done a lot of commercial work, and I've had like a small clientele of some celebrity haircuts and stuff like that. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about getting to that sort of level too. All right, let's keep going. So what are marginal gains exactly? Marginal gains theory is concerned with small incremental improvements in any process, which, when added together, make a significant improvement, right? So the idea is that change doesn't happen automatically overnight. It's the very, very small things that you can physically control that you can then regulate into your craft, and specifically behind the chair. So we're going to talk about the three dimensions of that, and we're going to talk about how those three dimensions can actually be brought down to an actual price point. So then when you're looking at your overall price of what you're selling to your clients, you can actually be like, okay, 25% of it goes to the skill set, 25% of it goes to hospitality, and 25% of it goes to that. And then you can range what you benefit or what you think those small things cost, and then kind of add it up into your overall price. And the idea is that with these little 1% improvements, you're not going to do it automatically and then suddenly charge your clients $20 more. It comes over time, right? And you want the client to first see those 1% improvements. And then when you do that percentage change in your price, they see the benefit from that and they're willing to pay that, right? And that happens very, very slowly over time. So you need to embrace the idea and concept that there is no perfection and that the closest we can do to achieve it are the small gains and shifts to elevate yourself. And one of the reasons I've really loved this term of marginal gains, because it keeps everything bite-sized and doesn't become completely overwhelming. And at the end of it, it really kind of helps not just you, not just your business, but you personally. And so this whole idea, like I said, I'm a big runner. So this whole idea originally started when one of the perfect examples that I could think of is this runner, Eliud Kipchoge, who is one of the best marathon runners, and he's the first person ever to break a 2-hour marathon. So for those who don't run or have anything to do with athletics, let me just break this down to you. If you're running, so a marathon is 26 miles, and this person is trying to run it in less than 2 hours. So on average, that's about a 14-minute, that's 14 miles per hour. And this is just the human running at that speed for 26 miles. And he already was, and the reason I love this story is because he already was the best runner in the world. And he only wanted to break his own record. It had nothing to do with anyone else or anyone around him. It was his own goal for himself. So he linked up with Nike, and they were like, okay, well, how do we crack this code of making the fastest man on earth even faster? And so they based it on 3 things: nutrition, his training, and gear. And so with each little thing that they brought down, they're shaving off, I'm not even kidding you, 30 seconds, 10 seconds, shaving off little 10-second moments throughout this huge 26-mile race. But the idea is that by shaving off these little tiny seconds and moments, he would get 4% faster so that he would break this 2-hour marathon. So training and elevation, more speed workouts, more strength, his nutrition, what he ate, what he was eating while he was running, and specifically the gear. So Nike kind of released these new running shoes called the Nike 4%, and the idea was that you get 4% faster. And all of this little tiny things just shave off seconds by seconds by seconds. And after many years, he actually did end up achieving that goal of breaking the 2-hour marathon, which people thought would be impossible to do. So for someone like me, who's such a huge fan of him and his story, I really wanted to base that into what we do, right? So how can we apply this idea behind the chair? And I think that the 3 things that we can really work on is hospitality, our skill, and our expertise. Because a lot of times when we're talking about doing men's cuts, especially on Instagram, you see a lot of people post these amazing fades and these incredibly experienced techniques to create these super clean lines and all that stuff. And that's great for us on Instagram as a professional looking at another professional's work. But how does that, does a client really notice if it's a perfectly blurry fade? No, because they don't really have the eye to see that. And I think a lot of people in our industry get stuck on this idea that skill is the only thing that's really worthwhile when you're doing a lot of, when you're trying to raise your price. And as someone who doesn't do a blurry fade and doesn't have the most perfect haircuts every single time, I always got really frustrated because there's so many other things that you can control outside of education to kind of elevate your overall experience behind the chair, right? I'm going to exit out of this real quick because I wanted to draw up a diagram with you guys. All right. Okay. So those 3 things that we were talking about. So can you guys see for those who can see the whiteboard? So sorry, there's maybe some technical difficulties, but I'm just going to keep plowing along. All of this is, again, being recorded, so if there is anything that you missed, you can always just go back on the website and find all this information. So the three things that we were talking about before are hospitality, skill, and expertise, right? Joe, let's see. Let's do, let's say this is us. Hey, there's a barber. Let's put a hat on them. Huzzah. Great. Okay, so this is you. This is what you can control. This is basically you as an individual, as an artist. And so there are the three things we have. Let's see, we have our hospitality. Okay. And then we got our, what did I say? We got our skill. And we got our expertise. Okay. And it kind of looks a little weird now with the face, but okay. So, and what is based off of, let's track these down like one by one. So hospitality, what do we talk about when we're talking about hospitality? To me, hospitality is, let's see, your attire, right? I personally really like to show up for work, like before actually walking through the door, you're mentally checked in. You're, you know, your clothes are clean, you're looking good, you feel good. You have a distinct style that separates you from everyone else. Clients really appreciate that. And I've always, you know, there's always that theory of like, you don't dress for the job that you have, you dress for the job that you want. And I always kind of like that as far as when we're talking about clients, like you kind of want to attract the people that you want to cut, right? So I really love music, I really love art. So I try to showcase that through my work clothing and to try to attract people of that nature into my chair, right? So if I'm trying to attract clients that are going to be willing to spend $175 a haircut, I want to look like someone that could afford a $175 haircut myself, right? So there's that. What else could there be? There could be music. I think a lot of times we seem to forget what music is less of what we want to listen to and more of what is making everyone else in the environment comfortable. Let's see, like a clean station, right? These are like pretty basic stuff, but they do, when we're, again, like when we're talking about these marginal gains, all these little things really add up. Let's see. Notes real quick, see what else there is. Oh, and the comfort aspect. So like how comfortable the space is there a waiting room? What kind of furniture is in the waiting room? I've like seen some places that legit have like outdoor lawn chairs. So all that little stuff that you can, I know some people probably don't own their own shop, but if you can even create this in your station, you know, keeping things clean, keeping things organized, showing up for work, looking clean, looking press. That's all these little things that you can kind of control that will help you in the long run, right? So then when we're talking about skill, and this is the stuff that we were talking about before, I think the skill aspect, everyone gets really, really focused on this and forget about all this other stuff, right? So we're talking about shear work, education, you know, your skills on clippers, your physically going out there and making sure that whatever talent that you have, that you can do it to the best of your ability, right? But I think people get really stuck up on this, especially with Instagram, and you're trying to basically show off to other people who are never going to get their haircut by you. So like other barbers. And I think when we talk about skill, especially when it comes to clients, I always kind of see it as I hire an accountant because I don't know anything about money, right? So when a client comes to you and they're asking about product and they're asking about what the right shape is going to be for them and for their jawline and even like their shape up of their beard and all that stuff and how they're going to style it, that's all great. But if you don't have the expertise on that level, ooh, what was that? If you don't have the expertise on that sort of stuff, the skill set doesn't really even matter. And so that comes to the third part, the last part is your expertise. And like I was saying before, it's great if you know how to do a perfect fade, but if you don't know what that fade is going to look like based on the type of hair, and the only way that you would know anything about the type of hair is by physically going out and doing a bunch of haircuts on a bunch of different people and building up that expertise and putting yourself out there. And I think this is one of the things that is completely where you really can elevate your price point. The skill thing is obviously important, but it's not everything. Hospitality is important, but it's not everything. But the expertise thing is literally what people are wanting to pay you for. And like I was saying before, like I pay an accountant to do my taxes and do all of my finances because I don't have that expertise. I'm not good at it. I have no idea how to like balance a budget, really. I'm pretty bad on all that stuff. So it's nice for me to talk to someone who actually enjoys that so much that I can actually learn something from them. That's what I like to pay my accountant for. And I've gone through many accountants before who they don't offer that. They basically just kind of run the numbers and just kind of spit out what I owe at the end of the year. But I like having someone who's so committed to what they like to do that they're teaching me as I'm also paying them for a service. So I usually, when it comes to expertise with clients, a lot of it comes down to when you're having a consultation with them, right? And one of my favorite things that I like to do when I break down a consultation is at the end of after I cut a new client's hair and do the whole rigmarole, and we talk about styling, we talk about the shape that's good for them, we understand why that haircut that I just gave them is the best fit for them. I give them my cell phone number and I say, from now on, you are not allowed to Google anything about your hair, because that's the number one way of clients to get insecure and find other people to do a haircut that they may think may look good on them, and they'll find someone else to do it. And that really kind of connects your experience with the client, but it also makes them feel validated for spending a lot of money when they know that they can reach out to you for anything. So I tell them, you know, if you're not sure if your hair is ready to get cut, send me a selfie and I can give you advice. If you're not sure what product and you're standing in line at, you know, Sephora and you don't know what products to get, send me a photo and I can help you out. And that's kind of committing to the fact that I know more than them about hair. So therefore, it is worth the $175 a haircut, because it's more than just the haircut as soon as they leave my studio. It's the haircut they're going to continue to wear every single day until I see him again a month or whatever from then. So those are like the three big bubbles that I kind of can try to pinpoint where the little things that I can progress on. And then throughout time, clients will start to see that being elevated in your skill set and in the chair. And then when you do hit them with that price point, the new price point, they won't mind so much, right? Okay, so let's stop that for real quick. All right, hi, back again. All right, so I hope that wasn't, it's kind of like a lot of information and it's a lot of like hodgepodge of things, which is why I tried to break it down in actual like diagram. So, and the way that the diagram works for me is it's all bite-sized, right? And so when you look at overall those three main things, you can step back and actually be like, you know what, like I do kind of show up for work and my place is kind of really clean and I do dress really well. Where else can I add to these marginal gains to then like justify raising my price come down the line in like 5 or 6 months, right? So, and the way that I like to look at that too is like when you're looking at your price point. So for me, say $150, you break it down like, well, how much is the hospitality part? Now, the reason I charge $150 is the hospitality part of my price point takes up a huge portion because I live in New York City and I pay an obscene amount of rent to work in Manhattan, right? Now, if you don't have to worry about that so much, you don't necessarily have to charge $150 a haircut. If you can buy a house and you own a shop in Texas and your rent is a fraction of what where I live, then you obviously, the 150 it ebbs and flows depending on where you live. So I don't want people to get like hung up on that sort of price. But it really is like laying out everything that you pay for throughout the month between your rent, the Wi-Fi, anything work related, and putting that all together and being like, okay, this is a percentage of what my price is going to be, right? So if you wanted to move and do your own thing in your own studio, or go to a fancier place, you'd have to take that in consideration, right? If because you could have like the best haircuts on earth and your skill set might be amazing, but if you don't understand how shape works and you don't have the expertise and your place looks like trash, I don't care how good you are, no one's going to want to pay a lot of money for that. So breaking all that down into your price point to three aspects, and then looking and being like, I think I deserve a $5 raise. Where would those $5 show up, right? Because you got to give something to take something back, especially your clients. So, is it doing more education? Is it investing in better tools? One of the greatest things that I've done recently since COVID is like just up my clippers. I use all JRL stuff now. I love the look of them. I love the power of them. I like that they're wireless. I like that they hold a charge for 4 hours. Like all that sort of stuff kind of like adds to the price point, right, at the end of it. All right, so I'm going to finish going on with here. All right, so that's going to lead back into this PowerPoint presentation. So going back to this. Okay, so then kind of what we were talking about before is like how to figure out your price point based on these marginal gains, right? So what I was saying before, breaking down the price between the hospitality skill and expertise. You write down every bill that you have for monthly, and you break it down into client numbers. So this really is like, I call it like receipt work. Like when you like scratch things back on a receipt or like a scrap piece of paper, just sit down and with a calculator and just figure out how much money you need to live monthly, and then break that down into numbers as far as clients go, right? And also how many hours you want to work. So I only work 2 days out of the week, but that means I need to have at least 8 clients a day to get all my bills paid and a little bit extra to like start putting the savings and stuff like that. So what does that mean? I need to have 52 clients a month, which averages then to 7 to 8 clients a day, right? So that gives me a goal. It's a realistic goal, and it's with realistic numbers based on my price point. And then that way you can start navigating, well, what is your goal? Like, do you have a goal for a year or 5 years from now? Do you want to buy a house? Do you want to, level up in certain areas? And then that's easy to kind of figure out, well, okay, if I was going to raise my price to this point, how quickly could I achieve these goals? It's really hard to stick to a budget sometimes when you are like us and it's commission, it's kind of all over the place. But writing it down in black and white and just having an idea of what you actually need to survive is a really easy way to kind of feel like you have control over your price and over navigating around what you need to build up your book of business, right? So then also put into factor if education is going to be always a thing. So informing yourself, committing to education, paying for classes, that sort of thing, you also want to include that into your budget. Okay. And I think that's it for that for now. Is there any questions from anyone so far? Hold on, turn this back on. I'm gonna unmute, so if anyone has any questions, just holler at me.
All guests have been unmuted.
Okay, so if anyone has any questions, let me know. You can either just shout out or you can type it in. But if everyone is kind of good, I'm gonna keep going. All right.
I was like awake how to sleep. I don't think
So
she likes it cold. I like it.
So next up, one of the things that's helped me. So now we have like an idea of
I didn't bring it.
goals to achieve that are attainable, bit by bit by bit. Because we want to, again, it's not, you're not going to tomorrow suddenly spend a bunch of money on education and a bunch of money on like the best
All guests have been muted.
clipper set or
You
shear
can
set.
unmute
Like
your
that stuff,
line by pressing
takes time,
star
it takes
six.
money. But at least the least you can do is like, for me, it's if you can control it, it's your attire and your music. It's like a very good way of just kind of tweaking it a little bit, and you'll start to see and feel a difference. And then from there, it's easier to kind of add more and more to it, right? And so the idea is that with these small progressions over time, you'll look back a year from now and be like, holy shit, you know what I mean? Like I raised my price by X amount of money. I have a little bit more of an understanding with my finances. I have a little more understanding of what my brand is and what how I want to sell my work and my art to the clientele. I have more of an idea of what kind of clientele I want. So a lot of that, for what we do, even though we may work for someone, you kind of have to control your chair as if it's your own little business and your own little brand. That's what makes you different from the person that works next to you, from the barbershop down the street. So sometimes it's as easy as just writing a lot of that stuff down and just kind of thinking and processing it throughout the time and trying different things out and seeing what works for you. But the whole idea is not to get overwhelmed with this stuff, because I think a lot of people get really anxious when they ask clients that they're going to raise their prices, and they're worried that they're going to lose clients. So usually when I say with that, it's like really trying to find a balance, because I remember doing a class and there was a girl who was charging $5 a haircut, but she worked outside of a military base. I think she was doing like 80 clients in like a week or something obscene. She had it was like 15-minute haircuts, right? And she was just like, I feel like I have to raise my prices, but I'm really happy where I'm at. And I was like, well, if you're paying the bills and you enjoy doing, 15-minute haircuts, 5-minute haircuts at $5 a pop, you're making the same amount of money that I'm making, except I only work 2 days out of the week and I take an hour for my clients, which for a lot of people is insane. But again, that hour goes into the hospitality aspect, which takes up a huge portion of my price. And so with her, she doesn't have to worry about the bells and whistles and taking an hour long and the customer service and the pampering around people. She just kind of does her work. And with that comes the $5 price point, but she's totally happy and she owns a house and she's paying her bills and she's a mom of 2 and that works for her. So it's I get a little frustrated sometimes also with price shaming or people kind of scoffing at certain people based on what they think people charge or their experience around things. So you really have to define what works for you. I know I like making time outside of the chair for other things, that I like to do a bunch of different sort of projects all at once, a lot of the times not even around hair. I knew that when I wanted to step out and do my own LLC, that education and traveling was a big portion of that. So I knew that I didn't really want to spend more than 3 days. in the studio, and I knew that I wanted to make my own hours, and so I incorporated that into my budget. Right? Not everyone has to do that, and one of the reasons also that I have a much more higher end clientele is because I try not to, I mean, quite honestly, I do a lot of work that is very probably unnecessary and probably making it more difficult for me. So I do most of my, which is the next segment we're going to do, I do most of my tapering and most of my fades just using shears. Now, is it kind of ridiculous and takes a lot of time? Yeah, it does. But if you're also paying almost, not including tip, almost $200, people kind of want to feel that experience for a lot of times. And also understanding that, like, the type of client that I have is not necessarily the most exciting or fun clients. They're not necessarily the youngest or the trendiest. So the haircuts can be pretty boring, but that's, again, something that I knew, and something that I knew that I was gonna, that's what education and traveling and networking and meeting other people and doing hair competitions, that's where I was going to feed into that aspect of creativity. I knew it wasn't going to find it behind the chair, because most cool, trendy DJs and everything like that don't spend that much money on a haircut, right? So, right, so it's just a little bit of that. Are we all still good? Everyone's still with me for the most part?
All guests have been unmuted.
Keep going.
October. We've been open.
Feel really one-sided. Okay.
So, yeah.
Again, you guys can always type into the chat part in the bottom if you have any questions that you want to shout out.
Not many. Our books are usually full.
It seems like most of the questions are
We
nothing to
get
do with
looked
me.
up every day.
all
Yeah.
technical stuff. So we're going to move on to the next segment, which is a little bit about that scissor over comb work.
I'm actually with a client
And I
right
also
now,
wanted
so
to
I
talk
need to go.
about
I'm not.
All guests have been muted.
that
You can unmute your line
idea
by
that
pressing
you're
*6.
working on into your price point. That can really showcase at the end of your client when you're talking about styling, because I think specifically with men, they really don't have much of an idea when it comes to styling, and that's really truly where you can showcase your expertise, showcase your skills, and you can pretty much like rope them in that they're paying for more than just the haircut. They're paying to basically understand what their hair has the potential of doing. So we'll talk about that when we get to this point. So I'm going to start cutting Kenneth. We've decided to call him Kenneth. All right, so I've already kind of did one side. We're going to do kind of pretty classic swept back situation, but I'm going to do scissor over comb in just this part, and then we're going to layer it in the back. I'm not going to go into a full haircut, which is why he's pretty much halfway done. We're going to do this side. I'm going to quickly do the top. I'm not going to really break that down too much, but then we're going to talk about the styling techniques that I was talking about. And to me, the consultation with styling is really how I kind of rope a lot of clients into believing that I'm like the only hairstylist out there. So we'll start with that. All right, let me get all this set up. All right, so you can kind of see it on this side a little bit. I'm going to bring this in a little bit closer. So we're doing a swept back, very traditional kind of basic haircut with a little bit of taper in the temple area. So when we're doing this sort of classic haircut, when we are making our sections, so the way that you section is the way that the direction of the hair flows, right? So sectioning equals directioning. So we're going to do diagonal sectioning skills so that when he pushed his hair back, we have the nice layered effect. Kind of see it there. Have that nice layer effect falling back. And because it's going back in that direction, when we take those sections, it's going to be sectioning off in that way. right? If we were going to section it totally up and down, you're not going to, you wouldn't get so much of a bubble triangular shape here with that weight flowing back. It'd be more straight up and down. So I usually like to use that horizontal kind of sectioning when I'm doing like just a straight up fade or a taper right to the top. You don't have to worry so much about the weight moving back. You just have to worry about the weight as it hits the top of the crown. If that makes sense. Okay. So let's go get them. And we're not even going to worry about the back. This is really just a quick little tutorial just on the sides and talking about specifically scissor over comb work, because I feel like a lot of people get lost on that. And while like you can use clippers for almost everything, sometimes it's not the greatest way to do things if you want to kind of just elevate it a little bit and make it a little bit more of an experience. Right. So. All right, so I usually, again, so I take these diagonal sections and I push all this forward, right? And if I want it really tapered, I'll make this whole sideburn area and I'll clean that up pretty close. So imagining, let's say it's pretty long now, but, right? So when I have that sort of guideline of this really short part, it's a lot easier for me to continue doing another diagonal section and elevating it just a little bit from there. Rachel, I'm going to have you just click out of your web video. So I'm going to elevate it just a little bit there. And then you can see my guideline, right? And make an easy cut from there. And then again, another diagonal section pushed forward. Elevate it just a little bit. Right. I'm left-handed too, so I'm sorry if you guys can't really see that well. And you're going to continue that basically diagonal, 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 all the way to the back. So you get right behind this ear, and that's where you start to see when you push it back, this is where you kind of want it to be a little bit more up straight. Well, a little more up straight if you're going to do a mullet, and then continue to pull it back if you want it all to kind of flow into one another, right? All right, keep going real quick. I'm going to pick this up a little bit just so we can kind of get to the scissor over comb work. So then when we get to here, right behind the ear, we're going to keep taking that diagonal section all the way to the back, right? So it's a continuation. For diagonal, 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 and then all the way back. Now you can also do this with like a feather razor or something like that to give it a little bit more of a less structured sort of look, more shattered and texturized. But just for the sake of time, we're just going to plow through this real quick. So then you can automatically start to see, get a little closer. You can kind of see, it's hard to tell with these webcams, but that sort of flow is naturally kind of, the weight kind of just falls on itself, right? And that's because, again, we were taking those diagonal sectioning all the way back. And so that weight carries all the way back to this part of the head. And essentially, that's pretty much where your cowlick would be, right? And that's the idea. If you want it to be pushed back like that, you do want the weight to kind of sit where that cowlick is, because the more weight in that cowlick, the more control you're going to have in that structure. And that's usually a big portion of issues, is when the cowlick obviously goes too short, just sticks straight up because it doesn't have any weight for that hair to kind of make it move in the direction that you want it to. So a lot of times with clients, it's a lot easier for them to style it at the end of the day if you leave this crown area just a little bit longer. So, kind of the basic gist of that. So now, let's say I want to taper this a little bit more, right? So what's a way that we can do it without using like our immediately grabbing our clippers? Now, I like using scissors or comb, especially if you're a hairstylist and you're trying to transition into doing men's hair and you're a little too anxious about just like grabbing clippers, because as we all know, like one swift whoop and then like the whole haircut is off, right? So when we're talking about the mechanics of scissor over comb work, I try to keep my body as square to whatever the subject is, right? So if I'm going to be scissoring over comb this section, I want to make sure that that section is fully, like my shoulders are parallel to the temple area and to where his head is, right? Because we're like, when we do scissor over comb work, we're using a lot of our whole body to keep everything balanced and even, and also just not to ruin our bodies at the end of it. So even my feet and everything is square to the subject. And then when I'm doing scissor over comb work, this is going to be the spine, and these two are always going to be friends. So we're going to do it this way. So the spine of the comb, and then we have our cutting blade, right? And then we have our movement coming here. To keep this dead center and try to keep this one as still as possible, because we don't want it flopping around like that. We want it to be as still and structured as possible, and that's going to create an even blending throughout the entire as we move up in the haircut, right? So we keep this as still as possible, and then we anchor this with the whole rest of our wrist and arm, right? When you start to see people kind of not really have structure in specifically their elbow and keeping that locked in, that's when you start cutting with like your fingers, which is exhausting, and it's going to like mess up your hand and the longevity of it, right? So you want your entire arm to be kind of pivot and holding this straight, right? So again, my feet are structured, my shoulders are structured, everything else is pretty much one fluid motion. And if I wanted to, oh, someone's calling me. If I wanted to shift or pivot, it's almost like the wings of a plane. It's going to, my arms are going to shift and pivot with it. And that way it keeps everything parallel and like fluid with itself, right? So you're going to take that point of cutting area that we're going to taper, and we don't want to touch this so much. We like that length here. So as we're moving up, we're kind of just going to extend up and out in kind of almost like a curve sort of area. So that way you're, by the end of it, you're not going to really have any hair touching. I like the idea of when we're doing scissor over comb, you continue to keep going up like you're following like this invisible guideline. So even sometimes I'll even, especially with students that are new to this, I have them keep cutting hair even if there really isn't that much hair in the comb anymore, just to kind of keep that fluid motion kind of embedded in their heads, right? So. Right? And a lot of people too, so if I was going to go in from this angle, now again, my whole arm, both my arms are also pivoting in that way. Because as soon as these go in, you're going to create an X with these and you're just going to start cutting holes into something that you really want to be as like clean as possible. So even with this shift, if I'm going the opposite way, everything still stays structured in the same, right? And you can get a different feeling or texture if you use the different size of your comb. So usually with things we want it to be a little bit smoother, a little like maybe the hair is a little bit closer. You're really trying to get into that area and you want to kind of blend it out as smooth as possible. We're going to use this part of the comb. If you want more of a textured base, let's say I just want to create a little bit of like weight shift in here. This side of the comb is a lot easier because obviously more hair falls into it. So then as you're cutting it, it creates a more chunky, natural texture movement to that. So for clean, more clean transitions here, and then for a little bit more fluid motions and more texture, we use this side. That makes sense. Which also makes sense if you think about it. It's as similar as a clipper, you know what I mean? But the wider the guard is, right, more hair falls through it, and the tighter it is, the more precise you're going to get with your fade. So it's the exact same thing. We're just doing it manually, just to create a little bit more of a hands-on experience with your client. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't make it any better. It's, you know, there isn't one way over the other. It's just my personal preference and how I like to do it. Cool? All right. So that kind of gives that. So now we have a nice little taper here. Obviously, we'll hit that with our clippers and then kind of clean that up around the edges here to kind of finalize it. But you have a nice kind of natural way of the hair falling in from the really short areas that you want to taper into all this texture that we created, right? And because we're doing it with a scissor over comb technique rather than the clippers automatically, you have a little bit more of a relationship with this area, and then you're less likely to make a quick mistake of trying to blend in a very short part to a very long part. So I'm going to quickly knock out the top because then I want to talk about some of the styling stuff that we were talking about and trying to keep our clients in the chair. So, well, I'm knocking this out real quick. When I'm all finished with a haircut, so to break down a little bit of what an appointment with me would look like is that you come in, we do a consultation, which usually takes about 10 to 15 minutes. And outside, especially if it's with a new client, it's more than just talking about their hair. It's talking about, you know, how often they shampoo it, what their daily ritual is with their hair, what they want their hair to actually do. Even if it's something that's like low-key impossible, I still like to know where my clients' heads are at. You know, obviously if someone comes in with super, super straight hair and they're like, I really want it to be curly, I wish I had more movement. Obviously I can't cut them their hair, but to me, I can hear the key words of like, oh, he wants movement. He wants more texture. You know what I mean? So I may not necessarily be able to give him curly hair, but I can give him texture for someone with straight hair, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like listening to what your client, not necessarily what they're saying, but listening to truly what they want. And that takes a lot of practice, and that's where that expertise comes from. So I think a consultation is one of the most important steps of having a chair and talking to a new client, because that's the only way that you're going to base a conversation with them and have a relationship with them. But more importantly, like they're going to actually, it proves that you're actually listening to them, which I think a lot of times can get lost with clients who are not necessarily used to that, especially with dudes. So, all right, so I'm going to quickly knock this out. So at the end of the haircut, so we'll do a consultation. I get them washed. So I personally like to have like a clean canvas with my haircuts. And then we do the haircut, and then at the end, I rinse the hair because a lot of these times these guys are going back to work or whatever, and I don't really want them shedding all over the place. So I'll rinse their hair, and then we talk about all the different ways that they can style their hair. And the way that I like to break it down is, are you getting ready for the weekend, work, or a wedding? And for some people, they want to look like it's the weekend every single day. That kind of like too cool to care. And then some people want to look like super polished and like they could like jump to a gala at any point. But the idea of breaking it down that way is that you can achieve all three of those styles with this one haircut. Let me show you how. And so hair basically is like the equivalent of a fabric. So if you took a white t-shirt and you crumbled it up and you threw it in the corner, it's going to dry that way. And hair is pretty much the exact same thing. So I usually try to tell my clients that they shouldn't just tousle their hair with as soon as they get out of the shower and they have like a towel and they just like go nuts with it, and then they wonder why their hair doesn't lay the way that they want it to. And so I usually try to get them into the new habit of actually thinking about the way they want their hair to fall while they're physically drying it with their towel. And it sets the hair that way. In the same way with like a shirt, if you just like laid it out flat, it's not going to be perfectly smooth, but it's going to be a lot smoother than you crumbling it up and throwing it in the corner, right? So even for the weekend look, I always tell them, just towel dry it the way that you actually want your hair to be. So some guys want it really tousled, and so that works for them. But then some people really do, they want it to like fall back, they want it to lay a certain way, but they don't necessarily like want to blow dry it or do that much to it. So for those type of guys, I just say, just towel dry it, throw in a primer. So for me, I'm going to use the sea salt spray from Hunter 114. So I like using this when it's mostly towel dried, and spray a little bit in as a primer. And for someone that doesn't really want to do much else to it, I just tell them, just towel dry it and let it be. But you have to do something. You have to set it some way. So the easiest way to do that for me, for clients, is just to towel dry it in the way that they want it to be. So that's the weekend look. Basically, the most minimal you can do, which is towel drying in one product. So then we're going to base it, bump it up one more, and we're like, okay, well, what if you wanted to look a little bit more polished for work? That's when you incorporate a second product and a blow dry. So I try to break it down. It's the same thing as like just using an iron, right? Just kind of polishes it a little bit more. But the haircut, no matter what, if you just leave it like this, or if you blow dry it, it's going to look really good. So for that one step up to going from the weekend look to the work look, you're just going to use a little heat. As we all know, like just kind of smooths everything out, polishes it. And for guys like this, where the haircut's pretty short, it just gives it a little bit of an extra direction, but it's like 30 seconds with the blow dryer. Really nothing any crazy. And so with that, then you'll polish it, usually with a paste. I like to use this fiber gum. It has like a medium hold to it. It's a little bit on the tacky side, but I like to use it when the hair is mostly dry. For the sake of time, I'm not going to pull out a whole blow dryer and do the whole thing. But so that's the second part. So weekend look, just a basic towel dry, one basic product. One step up, you add a finalized product to kind of give it a little extra hold, a little extra dimension, and we use a blow dryer. For the wedding look, you'll use hairspray and probably a brush. And that's usually when you have to start educating clients who aren't used to those sort of techniques. You're just going to have to teach them. But again, it's all doable. And no matter what, even if he left it like this, it still is a good haircut. And I think that sort of framing of how to style hair for men is the really like aha moment for them, of where they're seeing their price actually, like where that money's going into that haircut. Because now it's not just a haircut, it's 3 different unique styles for the same person. And you're educating them on how to actually like take care and manage that. And that's hugely beneficial for someone who's very not used to like spending a lot of time on their hair and not even realizing that their hair could do 3 different things. And it doesn't have to do just the same thing every single day. Once you get them out of that mind frame that their hair has like a million different ways of looking and styling depending on their mood, I think guys are really appreciative of that, because they're so used to basically just going to the same spot and getting the same haircut without really any sort of connection with how they look every day. So having that conversation with them and having that understanding and that really in-depth consultation with them is also something that you can benefit in your expertise standpoint of raising your prices. So those are all those little things that I've done in the past, specifically really in the past 4 years since I've been on my own, raising from $75, then, you know, after a little bit, like raising it a little bit more, $10, and then another, and then another. And yeah, you're definitely going to lose some clients, but I think it's more important that you, I always say like there's a difference between clients and fans, right? So like a client, you definitely need clients to get a fan base, but the fan base, they don't really, they just want to see you succeed, and they really don't mind paying that extra money if they see that the money is going towards something, right? That you're elevating yourself somehow. And I know that when I worked at a salon for a long time and I was really unhappy and I was doing like 15 clients a day and I was working 5 days a week and I was fully booked and that was great and everything. But when I left and decided to do my own studio, I stupidly assumed that a lot of my clients were going to follow me, and that really was not the case. But the ones that did follow me were so excited, and they told their friends about me, and they made sure that like I was succeeding because they actually wanted me to succeed because they like the service that I give them, and they turned from clients into a fan base. A client is someone that if you move or if you're fully booked, they're just going to go to the next person, and that's fine, and that's totally okay. But a fan base is actually going to like follow you to the next location, tell their family about you, tell their friends about you. And those are the people that more importantly, they're not going to just like pay your bills, but they're going to like actually feed the energy that you need to kind of continue and progress yourself. And I think it's really important that above all else, when we're talking about these marginal gains, that like, yes, like it's great to pay your bills and like have, you know, money in the bank, but I think that shouldn't be the end goal. The end goal really should be that at the end of it, you are insanely proud of what you do and it shows in your space, and that your clients can feel that. And that when you someday in the future look back on your at your book, you're very excited about every single person that's in your schedule, right? I definitely don't make as much money as I used to when I was fully booked all the time with, you know, 15 clients a day, but I'm a lot happier, and there isn't one client that I have in my books that I like dread to have anymore. And that I used to have that a lot, and I think we've all been there before. So to me, that was my gauge of success. It wasn't so much how much money I was making or how much money is my bank account, but it was like, can I pick the music every day in my own space? And am I going to be really excited about going into work and hanging out with my fan base or my clientele? And I think that it's been something that when you start to feel that, more and more people feel that too, and more people will come in and support you that way. And like real clients want to be your fans. They want to like see you succeed. They want to have all that extra stuff. And I think also that having that interaction and that relationship with them is really important, especially in this past year. I've had a handful of clients lose their jobs, and because they are people that I genuinely would be so upset if I didn't see them anymore, you know, giving them, I just call it like the hard knock life, haircut, which is like a free haircut, just because I know they need it. And they were really appreciative of that, and that's great. But I also know that like when things were really tough for me, they made sure that they were buying gift cards still, even though I wasn't working, or just reaching out and asking if I'm okay, or you know what I mean? So it costs more money to find new clients than it does to keep your regular ones. So I think that's also really important too. It's like if you know the ones that really love to see you succeed, it costs less money to give them an occasional like free haircut or an extra 10 minutes so they can like talk about themselves or what they're going through than it is to like have the advertising to find new people in the chair. So that takes a long time though, and it's a lot of work, but it's just like the little things that you can do throughout the day that might help, you know? So, all right, it's been an hour. I'm going to open this.
All guests have been unmuted.
Anyone has any questions? If you have any other questions outside of here or that you think of later, or if you want to talk more about whatever pops up, you can always find me on Instagram, just like at Mari, Mari.DeMonte. Or email me. You can do whatever you feel like. But hope that helped. And good? You all good with this? I'm still here. Alrighty. If no one has any questions. Hi, Jessica. All right, so if no one has any questions, and
No, I'm good, bro. No, I don't need that.
I don't actually know if that's true or not, so I'm just gonna go. Anyone who has any questions, reach out to me because I don't know if it's here or people are speaking and I just hear them. So just message me later, okay? All right, bye guys.